Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and this is Indie Comics Explained. And today I have yet another fantastic guest. But before we bring him on, please hit like, hit subscribe, let everyone know the channel's here. Please share this video. Let everyone know that we're bringing new indie creators and all types of indie creators to the show. So thank you so much. And also, I have a Kickstarter going for Tall Tales, so please check it out in the show notes. And here, without further ado, is our guest, Randy Zimmerman.
You just wanted to keep from saying old creators. New creators, old creators.
Yeah, what's funny is I'm one of the old creators, so it's like, like, damn it, how did we get here?
Exactly. All you got to do is snap, and suddenly you're old.
Right.
How long have we been doing this? And then you get past 25, and you go, no, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I've just been doing it for a while. That's all.
Exactly. I've been doing it for too long.
There's never too long on this, buddy. It's comics.
Yeah, I know. That is the truth of it. I've seen people leave, and all they ever want to do is get back in.
Well, the first time, and I've explained this to a lot of people, the first time you get that funny book, and you hold it in your hands, and it's yours. You wrote it, you drew it, you did whatever on it, even if you lettered it, even if you drew a funny picture and they printed it in the back page. You see that, you hold it in your hands, and it gets right into your bloodstream. And then it never goes away. And it's at that point that you decide if you're going to do this for the rest of your life or if you're going to go anyplace else. And a lot of us, especially back during that black and white boom, back in the 80s, back when you started, back when I started, we did it solely for the love of it. And once we got a few comics under our belt, that was it. We were done. Comics is what we're going to do. And then everything else is just a side gig in order to pay the bills.
Yep. So let's start off right there at that boom. So it's like it started in what, 82? Would that be about right? 82,
No,
83?
technically Arrow started about 85, but 82 was starting to ramp up. You had people starting to print black and white books. The direct market was picking up. Bud Plant was circulating anybody that they could get their hands on, no matter what the quality, because Bud came from a underground background, and really the alternative comics sprung out of the love of the underground comics, and there's some phenomenal underground comics that just you never hear about anymore, like Moondog and just even Freak Brothers. You hardly hear anybody talk about anymore. It's really, really phenomenal stuff, but. First Kingdom kicks out, which is a magazine-sized book, and Cerebus kicks out, which was started out as a parody of Conan, and then quickly turned into Dave Sims' autobiography. All the way from when he was a kid, all the way through pretty much his death meeting God and becoming Pope and all of this. But Cerebus is really an inspiration for a lot of us because it came out and was consistent and was always out there. So I grew up in the Detroit area, mid-Michigan area. I'm from Flint. Really born and raised in Montrose, a small town to the northwest of Flint. And Cerebus was it for us. When it came out, I was retailing in a bookstore with a. It was a combination of books and adult magazines and all of that, but I was the comic guy for the bookstore chain, and I would go through the entire chain's backlog, and they hooked into one of the first early direct distributors, which was Big Rapids up here in that was out of Big Rapids, Michigan, and I think that eventually evolved into Glenwood, but they were picking up comics 3 weeks earlier than the regular drugstore chain because the distributors didn't give a crap about comics. They just threw them in a corner for 3 weeks, threw them in a bundle, and threw them in the drugstores or the magazine shops. So, but if you got comics from a direct distributor, you were 3 weeks early. So I went through the entire chain and dug out a whole bunch of Cerebus ones that were just sitting there in the background. And then I'm searching for autographs. A couple of them were autographed. I stashed them. I ended up trading them. Years later, when Russ Cochran was kicking out the EC bound volumes, you remember those?
Oh yeah,
I got them all, and most of those was from me taking grocery bags of old comics to my local comic shop and going, I want that, for these. And they'd go
Right.
through it and dig down, a foot or so and go, okay,
Take
and
it.
just let me take it. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, Cerebus was really the start of it. The real explosion happened probably about the mid 80s, 83, 85.
mhm.
I got involved because I was really wanting to do comics back then, trying to get into the big time. And bumped into Bill Mesner Loebs.
Mhm.
And Bill had gotten the Journey gig at the
Right.
time. He was doing Wolverine McAllister. And
Mhm.
so I drew up I showed him a story the JB Space story that I did that was in Journey number 13. And
Mhm.
he belly laughed at that and said he had to print it. Well,
Right.
once I figured I had an in with him, I sat down and did a little Michael Taylor story that involved him finding an old copy of Wolverine McAllister. And he printed that in issue 11, I believe, of Journey. And that was my first printed work, other than fanzine
Mhm.
work or missed it by them, APA work, that kind of stuff.
Right.
APAs were amateur press associations. People used to mimeograph stuff together, staple it, and send it out to all the contributors.
Right.
So that would have a print run of 100, maybe at most 75. But Journey was my first real exposure. That introduced me to Ralph and Stu, who were starting up Arrow Comics. They were doing fantastic fanzine,
Mhm.
and they did Realm and Dead World were already in the planning stages, but they needed a guinea pig to go first. They didn't want their stuff to go first.
Right.
So Sue Van Camp and I volunteered to do Tales from the Universe.
Mhm.
So, and that was off of the JB Space was a part of that. Sue and I had sat down and just bounced off of one another. I'm sure very similar to what you and Daphne do. And all of a sudden, we have a whole universe and 15,000 characters and all these different stories and situations that we want to tell. And we just took Tales from the Universe and ran rampant with it. So
Oh, that's awesome. Now, how long? Now, it's funny because Daphne's the big Tales from the Universe fan.
great. Tell her I
So
say thanks.
yeah,
Thanks.
but actually, she has a request. She
Okay.
says you need to somehow get that in a giant omnibus along with Varcel's Vixens and Mischievous or
Well,
Mischievous.
Well, it's really funny because I have a bucket
Hmm.
list, and
Right.
that's the next book up on the bucket list. I want
Okay.
to
Cool.
I want to do more of that. I've got the rights
Hmm.
to reprint the stuff. Sue and I signed papers quite a while ago. Sue's no longer doing comics, and she's
Okay.
that's a whole different story. But
Hmm.
I, we're still splitting
Right.
any profits that we get from the book, but that's definitely a thing on the table because there's not a month that goes by now that I don't have somebody get a hold of me who found a copy from someplace. Are you the same Randy Zimmerman that did Tales from the Universe?
Hmm.
Yep. How come you're not doing that anymore? God damn, that was a great show, or that was a great series, or I like this character or that character. You could have really expanded this character. Ralph from Arrow Comics always wanted to do Retro Ram, really bad.
Hmm.
Wanted to tell a whole big, space opera with the Rangers. Sue and I have a basic outline for a bunch of stuff that we never touched. I did a treatment for a movie
Oh, okay.
that was pitched at DreamWorks about oh no, it wasn't 20 years ago. It was more like 11, maybe 11, 12 years ago.
Okay.
Back whenever Kung Fu Panda came out, because that was the
Right.
project that ended up in that slot. But
Hmm.
I had a 3-part mischievous movie
Hmm.
figured out and had done a full treatment on the first part, and it literally had every Aniverse character running through it at one point or another.
Hmm.
And I was really, really proud of that script, and I've still got it, and I want to adapt that really bad because it covers. It's called the Escape from Home, is what it is, and it covers Mischievous's youth when she was on Felonia, all the way up to the point where she got the heck off of her home planet.
All right. Cool. She'll be
So
very happy to hear
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, that's not going to land in the omnibus. That's a major effort right there.
Right.
But
Right. Right. No.
there's some stuff that I don't have direct rights for. The Caliber 3-part Varsel's Vixen
Hmm.
series won't be there, but Aniverse 2 and 6 will definitely be in the omnibus. And there's a lot that I want to do. There's a couple of Corehawk short stories that I don't think have been printed before. There's a bunch of short stories that have been scattered all over the place back during the 80s and 90s that I want to reprint all in one volume. So, yeah,
Hmm.
a couple, hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully soon we'll get that omnibus together. But right now I've got another project in front of that's kind of more important, and well, I can't say more important, but it's really taking precedence. It's eating away at me to get done. I got to get it done. Got to get it done. Get it out. And that's going to be a large graphic novel format book that I'm doing on my own. So that's going to take a while. So.
Gotcha.
Right now I am officially on page 26. And I'm of the project.
No. I mean, like, of how many pages?
Oh, of probably 130 is what I figured.
Okay.
So it's going to take a while.
Yeah. So now with that project, like, all right, just we'll talk about your current project a little bit. So I mean, so you had 26 pages of a 130-page project. Now you say it's gonna, like, how many pages are you doing per week? You doing 1 or 2? You're doing
that depends upon my my ability to work on it, because I've got some commercial jobs that I have to put off. Under these times, you do whatever you can, you know.
Right.
But whenever I have a commercial job spring up, I have to put that aside and work on something else. So right now I'm averaging now, thankfully. Before this, I hadn't worked on it in like a month, which was driving me crazy. Because like I said, it's a project that's it's very topical. It's really eating away at me. It's going to be I hope it's going to be a major work when it's done, that a lot of people are going to want to read just to read it.
right.
But you know, I want to get farther along on it before I make a big announcement. But
Gotcha.
when I do, I really want to make a big splash with it and point out that, you know, this really needs to be done. It needs to be seen. Needs to be read. That kind of thing.
All right, cool. Looking forward to that. So now, going back to Arrow.
Sure.
So you had Tales from the Universe come out. And then, like, what was your participation as far as the other titles? You know, something like The Realm or Dead World.
Well, after Tales came out, really after Realm 1 came out, Arrow kind of exploded. Really big. And we went, I think Tales 1 had a print run of 5,000. Tales 2 had a print run of 3,000 because nobody knew what to do with it. They weren't... I don't know if they weren't ready or it just didn't get enough visibility. But then when Tales 3 came out, we printed 15,000.
Wow.
And it just went boom. And that's why the first Varsel's appearance is super rare. And I just reread it the other day. It's still a really solid story. You know, that I'm extremely proud to have been a part of. Sue, a lot of that is Sue. Sue created the majority of the Vixens.
Gotcha.
So, and Varsel is really her character, and it's something that's very near and dear to to her still. So,
now,
other than that, I became, after things really blew up, Arrow or Realm went from like 10,000 to 40,000 issues. They brought me on as art director. So Ralph and Stu were really in charge, and I was there a couple times a week because I had to drive from Flint all the way down to Ypsilanti, where their main office is. It's about an hour drive, and sit there and do mostly little small menial stuff, some art direction stuff, color piece here and there. Talk to the guys and girls, talk to the talent, see how they were coming along. And to try to keep everything on schedule. The big thing that kept everybody on schedule, though, working for Arrow, is we all used to get together at Ralph and Stu's on Friday night for pizza, and other enjoyments, adult beverages, and it was the '80s. And everybody would bring their portfolios and show the stuff that they've done. So there was always movement. There was always stuff going on. There was always great artwork being looked at. Where are you going to find talent like Mark Bloodworth, Vince Locke, and Guy Davis, three completely different artists? And that was the fun of working for Arrow, is every book, every project was completely different.
Now, the one I'm primarily a big fan of is The Realm, because that's the one I started collecting. I was a huge fantasy fan. It had a huge effect on me and my work. Now, how did Guy Davis, did he just appear? Like, was there some kind of cat? Somebody know him from somewhere?
Oh, Guy Davis is a 19-year-old kid walked into a convention and says, "Hey, I like to draw." and they said, "Hey, your style is kind of Japanese anime looking. Maybe you should do this D&D book that we did." Realm was literally the D&D campaign that Ralph and Stu had and ran.
Hilarious.
Want to find out how things go? Well, let's just keep playing.
Right, right.
You know, and it reads like that. It's just a rough and tumble fantasy adventure story that is just constantly moving. You know, they had some plot threads done up, but for the most part of it, they were just role playing and moving it from place to place. Every book that Arrow did back then was a niche book. I mean, the Anniverse was a funny animal book. Realm was a fantasy book. Dead World was a Romero book.
Right.
You know, Night of the Living Dead. Absolutely. Night Streets was an urban crime drama. System 7 coming after that, which was a superhero book. And then we had a few other books in line to go after that never got off the ground because Arrow started, falling apart. So really, falling apart's too rough. It started drifting apart.
Gotcha.
It was more like it. As that was caught in the bust era, when Glenwood suddenly called up and said, "Hey, you know that $40,000 that we owe you? You ain't getting it."
Wow.
You know, Sunrise called up. "Oh, we're a bunch of guys. We're not business people. Bunch of hippie dudes, pretty much. What was past the hippie era, but a bunch of guys sitting around eating pizza." And drawing and making funny books. The first Arrow never really had an accountant, never really had a lawyer, and everything just fizzled apart once the bust happened, and Glenwood ended up leaving $40,000 off the table. Sunrise Distributors, we called him Scott Rosen. Is what we were calling him. Sunrise Distributors went under owing Arrow $20,000.
Wow.
That they never recovered, and he went off to do Platinum and Men in Black and all of this crap, and never bothered. Just we're gonna cut that. We're gonna start another company. Great.
Right.
Ralph
Griffith says 120K lost.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
That's
I'm
insane.
sure. Ralph would know the figures. Absolutely. Yeah. Is he in the chat? I got.
Yeah, he's in the
chat
chat. Yeah.
Now. Yeah. I got to switch over to live comments here.
Yeah.
Hey, Ralph.
Your good friend Varian wants to know what do you have against smooth, glossy, high quality paper and comics?
I have nothing against smooth, glossy, high gloss paper in comics. He just thinks I do.
Oh, okay.
I just have a lot more love for newsprint.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
I love comics history. I eat it up literally. Comics, there's a certain aspect of comics that's definitely high art, needs to be respected, needs to be put on the high glossy nice paper. But there's also an aspect of comics, especially when I was growing up, that was newsprint, that was gritty, that was sticky, inky fingers all the time, and that you read sitting in your treehouse. You rolled it up and stuck it in your back pocket. You threw the stuff without bags and boards into grocery sacks, literally, and passed them amongst each other in the neighborhood. That kind of stuff. There's a bad, in my opinion, there's a bad, desperate need to get back to that kind of era, at least in some format or another, so that comics are out there inspiring, as opposed to just getting collected, and being read by older, more distinguished, dignified readers. The Japanese have the same basic idea, I think, in doing the Shonen Jump and the incredibly large phone book manga books that you can see people on the subway train reading in 30 minutes or less. Yeah. And we need to get to that point where we're doing the same kind of thing and doing the classy albums, but also doing that disposable stuff. So now, that's why he thinks I don't like glossy paper.
Now, do you feel we need to probably get back to a point where maybe we have a price point that's maybe more affordable?
Well, that would be part of the newsprint thing. That's why Alterna Comics, in my opinion, is so important out there. The $4.99 for 80 pages, your big story, $5. Okay, not a problem. Here's a $1.99 comic. Cool, great. No problem. And then later, he can put them on the glossy collections or do hardback versions and volumes and all that for people to put on the shelf. Absolutely. But in the meantime, you really need a comic you can roll up and stick in your back pocket and just abuse. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Now,
Needs to be done. Needs to
yes.
be done. You're seeing dollar comics springing up. Then there's so many dollar stores out there, and there's only Dollar Tree is doing a dollar comic. And those there should be, like, you see all of those puzzle books out there and all these different formats, your coloring book format, your little digest format. Comics ought to be out there right next to it.
Yes.
Even 2 panels on a page, or the Brunelli books that come out of Italy are a prime example of that. We need more of that here, inspiring kids that have a couple bucks. They go, well, this looks kind of cool. It's got a guy in a spaceship, or it's got a girl in a half ripped space suit or whatever being chased by a large monster. I want to read this book. Okay, just to inspire that. There's a whole level of there's a whole advancements in technology, just like you see all the scientific advancements that Star Trek spawned, that early comics spawned as well, and we're not seeing that nowadays.
No.
We're seeing way too much realism.
Yes.
Way too much angst. Way too many pizza outings, that kind of stuff.
Well, 1986 hit, right?
Yeah.
And we had Dark Knight and Watchmen, right?
Yeah.
And that started that thing.
Nothing wrong with Watchmen. Nothing wrong with Alan Moore's stuff is genius. And there's a desperate need to raise that art level. Absolutely.
Right.
The big problem with comics wasn't even necessarily Dark Knight. Dark Knight was oppressive, angst-ridden, and violent compared to Watchmen, which was super dark, but it was very intellectual. There were a lot of things were going in Moore's head. There's a lot of things going on in Moore's head that are a little bit more advanced than the stuff he's writing, and you can tell that. The Watchmen's a much deeper work. Dark Knight's almost like a scratch compared to the meal that you get from Watchmen. The real thing I think that shifted comics about that period was Image, that came in, and you got a lot of what I call circle template books that suddenly popped up. Suddenly the girls were all circles, the guys were circle, circle, and it really blew out the retailer dollar. It's what it did, and that made the experimental black and white book something that became extremely rare. But during that period of the 80s through the probably early 90s, when Image really came in and took an obnoxious hold, everybody and their brother were doing 15 superhero books. Right. There's still a lot of these books out there. Somebody's going to write a book one of these days and point out all of the incredibly inventive, imaginative, and cool books that were out during that time. I think your Tall Tales was out during that period. Stuff like. You talk to anybody anymore, you mention Fish Police to somebody, they look at you with a blank expression. They have no idea what you're talking about. Even Love and Rockets, a lot of times, gets a blank expression. Well, what was that all about? Right. Well, First Kingdom. Let me show you some high art. Boom. When did this stuff come out? Holy crap. Well, it's not, then Solson springs up, and we get Samurai Santa and Inviso World and all of that. The generic comic book. Huh?
Samurai Penguin?
Yeah, Samurai Penguin was different. That was kind of on the Turtles thing. Turtles come out and a whole bunch of funny Animal Warrior books popped up. Yep. But that's just the nature of the business. Everybody has to copy where the last bit of money was.
True. What was one of those? Reagan's Raiders?
Yeah, that was Solson. That was towards the end that was right at the bust. You know? And Cliff Biggers came out in Comic Shop News and said, "Black and whites are over." And we saw our numbers go right straight through the floor.
Now, what exactly did you see cause that implosion in the black and white market?
A lot of it was Image. A lot of it was the incredibly substandard black and white books that literally flooded the market. You had Blackthorn doing comic strip collections that normally would be incredible to see. But they just grabbed whatever Xerox copy they had sitting on the floor and stuck it in under somebody's plate, and they tried to print it. Some really, in my opinion, some really badly done substandard print work was done just so people could grab a buck. And that's what hurt the alternative comics market a lot. Image coming out really crushed it because they soaked up all of the retailer dollar. And the retailers were already at the point where they were going, I ordered 3 of your books and I still have 3 of your books here. And it's like, don't order this crap. Try to order some stuff that's artistic.
Right.
There are a lot of guys out there, people, not just guys, out there taking a lot of very inventive chances with a lot of really great product that you don't see or hear about anymore. Just gone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think all that stuff now you'll find it either on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. That's where you're going to find those things.
A lot of them are springing back there, because again, it gets in the blood, and you have to do it. But that's the audience that's coming into crowdfunding. Isn't the mainstream retailer comic shop audience. It's the guys and the readers. I got to stop being gender specific here. It's the readers from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010 that got dispirited and walked away from the mainstream because it was the same cookie cutter crap angst-ridden cookie cutter crap, dark angst-ridden cookie cutter crap over and over and over again. And people want to be entertained, and comics were not doing that for them. Well, now they're looking back and they're hearing, so-and-so's doing what again? Oh, well, I got to look that up. Click, 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 all of a sudden. And then they're catching podcasts like what we do and learning about new books all the time. And there's a lot of, again, we're seeing a renaissance of very inventive, very creative products out there in the Indian alternative market that are just, some of that work is just astonishing.
Yep.
You sit there and you can't help but back it because it just looks that great.
Yeah, there's a lot of fantastic work coming out now. At the end, towards the end of Arrow Comics, right? Like when you saw
Arrow
the writing,
1.0.
1.0, when you saw the writing on the wall, what came next? What were you thinking? Like okay, what are we gonna, like? I don't know how deep you were into the business end of it, where you were like, damn it, this is over. What are we going to move on to? So,
No, I got another offer, and I went out and started self-publishing. I always wanted to get out in self-publishing, and I started, publishing my own stuff. So that I did Massive Comics for a little while with money fronted from my employer. We did Weeby Comics for a little while. That was money backed up by, that was first. Weeby Comics was first. Backed up by a comic shop owner that we printed. Arrow at the time was having a rough time because they went, like Ralph said, 120 grand in the hole. And they ended up giving the properties of Realm and Dead World to Guy and Vince. And then Mark always owned Night Streets. We always owned Tales from the Aniverse. So I printed a couple of issues of Aniverse as a Weeby comic. We printed an issue of Arrow. We printed a Dead World collection. And then can we be blunt here?
Yeah, good.
I don't know if if you're aiming for an all general audiences or
no. You can, if you want to cuss, you can cuss. It's fine.
Well, the store owner that had been backing Weeby Comics suddenly lost all interest in doing a lot of things because he was listening to his little head as opposed to his big one. And he started screwing around, and he was married at the time with 2 kids, and it turned into a major fiasco mess, and that broke up. And for me, I was running the retail shop at the time. He had a store in Flint and another store in Bay City. I was running the Bay City shop, and then I came back down here and was running the Flint store. And while I was here in Flint running the shop, this girl kept coming in every new comic day and buying stuff, and came in better dressed and better dressed and better dressed. And we started striking up a conversation, and I ended up getting married to her about 30 years ago. And we've been married ever since. After, I had gotten off a bad relationship a couple months after that. I was like, women, and I'm going to concentrate on my comics. I'm going to do my work. And she's coming in and looking really nice. And she had a 5-year-old son. I had a 5-year-old daughter. She's like, well, maybe we should play date them and take them bowling. Well, yeah, maybe we should. Well, maybe we should go out and see a movie first. Yeah, maybe we should. So we went and saw Beetlejuice at the theater. And then, boom, I was moved in with her within a week. And we've been together ever since. But
That's awesome.
I mean, that's off of printing comics, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a good part about retailing at that
Mm-hmm.
point. And it's kind of ironic where the store owner was kind of went off one way and I went off
Yeah.
another way. And
Right. Right.
I've been married for 30 years. I don't know. I don't think he stayed married to the girl he was running around with. Anyway,
So after.
then after
Go
that, I
ahead.
got another job and I did Massive Comics for a
Mm-hmm.
while and printed under a Massive Comics banner, which was intentional because it put me right after Marvel in the listings at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because Diamond, which was the only game in town by that point, was listing everything alphabetically at that point. So Massive slid in right behind Marvel, and
Mm-hmm.
I printed 3 issues of Tales from the Anniverse and one adult comic under the Massive Comics banner, and then I stopped doing that. I'm trying to remember why. I think it was because we weren't making a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
at it. I was constantly borrowing from my employer and then paying him back with the first with the check that we got back from Diamond, and
Diamond.
it wasn't really making a lot of money.
Now, what were your sales like at that time? I mean, we're
I,
selling 2,000, 1,500.
yeah, I would be guessing that would be about right. I know
Mm-hmm.
that I made a killing selling the adult comic, and it had a $2.95 price tag on it, and it
Mm-hmm.
was extreme. It was I don't know if I should even say that on the air.
What?
Well, why not? It was a
Yeah.
triple X comic
Yeah.
that still had some characters in it. The time that those characters are on my bucket list too. Maybe eventually
Mm-hmm.
I'll get back to, but that's much farther down the list than Anniverse. But I remember making that money and not feeling good about it. You know what
Okay.
I'm saying? I don't know if I want to be known as a smut guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped doing that, and I'm trying to think. After that, I think I jumped jobs
Mm-hmm.
and started doing commercial work. A lot of commercial work at that point. After that, I owned my own business for a little while, and no. While that was going on, I did Arrow 3.0. There had been another version of Arrow that did the Dead.
They
That
did
Ralph and
what?
Stu, the
Oh,
Dead.
okay.
That
Mm-hmm.
Ralph and Stu were behind. Jason Moore was involved with that. Uh, they had done 2 issues of the Dead
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't keep it running. So they shut down, and then like a year or so or 2 after that, I asked Ralph and Stu if I could use the name, and I ended up doing Arrow Comics.
Right.
That's that way,
Oh,
yeah.
yep. That.
Arrow,
Yep.
that Arrow Comics, we call Arrow 3.0, and
Mm-hmm.
I kicked out about 55, 56 products with that
Wow.
Arrow Comics. We did Arrow
Mm-hmm.
Anthology. We printed Ralph and Stu's Dark Oz
Mm-hmm.
material that they had moved that from Caliber, and we had Arrow printing that. We did a Arrow Anthology. We did all sorts of little scattershot books. I did War of the Worlds because I brought that from Caliber. Printed a
Mm-hmm.
couple of issues of the Memphis Front there. Never did finish off that story. That's like 4 down on the bucket list, is to get that done and get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, with when we were doing that, Scott Moore and I were in on that, and we kept butting heads with Diamond constantly.
Mm-hmm.
They're at that point they were raising their minimums. They were
Okay.
causing us as much trouble as they possibly could. We had retailers literally coming at us, going, "I ordered 5 and I only got 3 from Diamond. Why are you shorting Diamond?"
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, what makes you think we would ever remotely short Diamond? We figured that, in our estimation, Diamond was cutting our
Your
purchase
orders?
orders by about
Mm-hmm.
20%, 25%, just to try to
Wow.
give us grief. And they were giving us constant hassles. It got to the point with Diamond that we were playing with them
Mm-hmm.
back because we were tired of being played with by them. And
Right.
we started pulling stunts.
Mm-hmm. What'd
You
you
know,
do? I gotta hear this.
there was a Blair Witch Project had just come out, so
Mm-hmm.
that'll give you a time reference. We got a book from Caliber.
Mm-hmm.
A guy was disgruntled with Gary. Don't ask me the details. Just that we picked up the book. He had a book using his character, which was a clown assassin named Happy the Clown.
Okay.
And he had gotten a book done that looked really manga influenced.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to do Happy the Clown manga special #1. So we
Right.
solicited for Happy the Clown manga special #1. We sent him a cover illustration. We sent him a description that was 2 paragraphs long. Diamond went and printed the description in Diamond Previews and completely edited out every reference to manga, except for the title, which they couldn't touch because it was Happy the Clown Manga Special #1. And at the time, manga was starting to rage, right? They cut out every reference to manga and printed the picture about the size of a small postage stamp. Right, and I mean they massacred the solicitation, just literally massacred it, almost to the point of it not being readable. And we're looking at that, and we called them up and said, "What have you done to us?" Because this is a very heavily manga influenced work. It looks like a manga. It looks like a hardcore manga. And they told us flat out, we can edit your solicitation any way we want. We can display you in the catalog any way we want. And we ended up getting orders in, and it was 500.
Wow.
So, and it was a large size. Well, not really a large size book, but it was a good book. And I called the guy up and I said, "Look, dude, we got 500. I can't print you because our break even was 800 at the time."
Right.
And I said, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to hang on to your product for 6 months, and then we're going to come back and solicit it as something else. And we're going to whip their ass. Is what we're going to do." And he had enough faith in us, and he wasn't doing anything with the project anyway. He's completely disheartened, and that was part of the reason why I stopped doing Arrow 3.0 in the first place. Is there were so many people getting disappointed because the Diamond was so intent on castrating, and I use that term literally, the independent market so badly. They wanted we ended up cornering a guy at the Chicago Con, our Diamond rep. At the Chicago Con, he flat out told us, Diamond wants everybody in the green section to dry up and blow away. That was his exact words. Never forget it. But anyway, 6 months later, all right, we tell the guy, this is what we're going to do. You go back to your artist guide and you have him redraw it. We're going to refocus this book so that the whole basis of the story was the clown was chasing after this young, nubile assassin character, tracking her down. Happy the Clown Manga Special #1 ended up shifting names. We called it after the antagonist. Right. Young, blonde, image was rolling. It was hot, right? Hot. We called it Butterfly Gun. All right. Then we told Diamond we had exclusive North American rights to a great underground Korean artist. Nobody has seen that. It's an underground property, so it's adult. It's very adult. We said on top there was some booby in the story. We got the exclusive rights to Shiro Otomo's Butterfly Gun. It's a book that's never been printed in North America before. We have the rights to print it, and we are starting a new imprint in order to get it done. So we started Arrow Manga for that book featuring Butterfly Gun, featuring that great Korean artist, the work by Shiro Otomo. It was going to be great. We got orders for 3,000. I'm not lying.
Wow.
And we not only were able to print that book, and it's a solid book. It's still a good book. But we were able to give a nice profit chunk to the guy. He was bawling over the phone when he got the check. I can't believe you did this. This is amazing. And it's like, I guess this is how we have to go from now on. Is what we decided. Well, Diamond kept playing with us. They kept telling us it got to the point where they were literally telling us what books we could or could not print.
Wow.
We'll take this book. You can't print that book. Why not? Don't like it. Oz at the time was being written by Gary Bishop, was still being drawn by Bill Bryant. And we had brought on Bill Mesner-Loebs because he was looking for work to ink the book. And the numbers on the book were going up in a U shape.
Right.
And Diamond decided to impose minimums about 2 issues before that, and it was below their minimum line, and it was gaining really fast. Well, to them, it was 3 strikes, you're out, you're below our minimum line, you have to stop the book. Wait a minute. What do you mean we have to stop the book? We solicit for the next book. We're going to be over your minimums. Because look, we're here, we're here, then we're here, then we're here, and we only have to get up to there. No, we don't care. You have to stop the book. And that was really the straw that broke us. That was like, well, if they're telling us what we have to do, we don't. I'm stubborn. That's why I'm not working in the mainstream. It's because I can't get along with. with anybody unless we're doing, that's why I was been self-publishing all this time. So I'm like, well, hey, to Diamond.
Right.
This is what you're going to take. So at the time, I had an underground type character, a little monkey that I had drawn that we created him literally at a Philadelphia con that was completely dead. We're talking with the guys that had Cry for Dawn, the CFD at the time it was called, Pam Hazelton and Joe Monks, about our favorite underground characters. And one of mine was Grass Green's Flip the Bird. And I says, well, if you did it today, you'd have to call it Spank the Monkey. And they rolled. They thought it was hilarious. Well, and then there at the con, we drew up Spank and his cousin Shock the Monkey, because the Gabriel song was really hot at that point. And came up with a whole story behind him. And I had done some one-page stories in the fanzine that CFD was doing. Crying Monk, I think it had turned into at that point, called Lacune. And had done some commentary about the comic market featuring the two little angry monkeys, Shock and Spank. Well, they didn't want to print a book that said Spank the Monkey in big letters on it. So I ended up doing a one-issue special and made good money called Shock and Spank, the Monkey Boys Special Number 1, where he talks about all sorts of different things. Well, that was, not quite while Arrow was going on, I don't believe. I think it was slightly before we did Arrow 3.0. I did a lot of freelance gigs as often as I could between Arrow 1 and Arrow 3. I mean, everywhere. I got printed by Caliber and Oddball publishers up in Canada that never gave me anything for. I would put whole books together and send them to, hey, that book's great, send us number 2. Hey, if you liked it that much, send me a profit sharing check. Didn't happen. So they didn't get number 2, But they did Shock and Spank the Monkey Boy Special Number 1. And it had made some good money. And at this point, it was Clinton was in office and the Monica Lewinsky scandal was going on. So I said, look, I'm going to do an issue of Spank the Monkey because I want to do it really bad. We went through and wrote our solicitation, or I went through and wrote the solicitation off the top of my head. Spank wakes up in the morning, Spank likes coffee, Spank hates SUVs, Spank does this, Spank does that. And then I had planned to turn the book into an entire treaty point by point as to how bad Diamond had treated us. And then that was going to be the last book that Arrow Comics ever printed. And at the end of that book, Spank would sit here literally flipping off the industry and going, screw you, we're out of here, Diamond sucks, the market's never going to get better as long as Diamond's in charge, F you all, we're done, right? So, of course, I draw up a cover with Shock and Spank wedged in a cleavage with a bright pink bikini top. That was my mistake. Because Diamond sees the cover, boom, we have a big cover picture and a huge spotlight on the book with everything verbatim for what I had written down for the solicitations, right? They sent the cover to Wizard. Before they even printed the previews book, Wizard printed the cover in an issue of Wizard with on the edge sections, what they called it. And they literally said anybody who draws a cover of 2 monkeys wedged in a cleavage has to be a genius. This book's going to be hot. So we get numbers in, and again, it's pressing high 3,000, and this is back when we're struggling just to get 800, literally. So it's money, it's bank money. So I had to sit for a week and a half and literally go through whatever I've come off the top of my head solicitation that I sent to Diamond and create that book in order to hit deadline. So that Spank number 1, which thankfully there's very few copies out there on the market that I see anymore, thank goodness, because I literally drew that book in a week and a half.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and then like I said, we get big numbers, and we're like, oh, this is so cool. Let's keep going. We're going to keep going because we've got money to keep stuff printing. So Spank 1 comes out. It's great. I start scavenging all of the little stories that were in the Shock and Spank, the Monkey Boys book that we printed through CFD for further issues. And I'm in the middle of printing, 2 or 3 other books a month. So Spank literally gets secondary treatment for me. I'm not able to concentrate on it as much as I'd like. In fact, issue 3, I think I kicked together faster than I did issue 1.
Mm.
Issue 2 was about strip clubs, and that turned out pretty good
Uh,
because with the strip club situation in Flint at the time was amazing.
mm.
Yeah, we were a shop town, GM town, So
Okay.
anyway, if you, I learned really quick. You ever want to learn how to draw female anatomy, female superhero anatomy?
Mm.
Take a sketch pad to the strip clubs and sit there and just sketch it until you get it right, because you're never going to find more trim, more athletic women closer to superhero dimensions,
Mm.
than you will there. But anyway,
Mm.
Spank starts sliding. The numbers slide. Issue 3 is about television. Issue 4 is about Star Wars, and it's time to stop it again because the numbers are bucking down. And Diamond is relentless. They're constantly screwing with us. They're telling us what we can and cannot print. We had a book that we picked up from Mick Furnett, which was a barbarian after the apocalypse kind of book called Corvus. And we went out and found a great artist for that, Abdul Rashid, who ended up going on to do work for Marvel. We had it inked by Tim DeZahn, who had a lot of Marvel books under his belt at that point. And the first 3 books Mick did on his own and self-published it.
Mm.
Or the first 2. We published issue 3 as an Arrow comic.
Okay.
Because we wanted to keep the story going. He already had it done when we picked up the title, and we'll print it, and then we'll find let us find an artist for the next one. We rebooted it as Corvus 1, and he rebooted the pretty much told the story not from the start, but told it from a definite beginning, so that anybody coming onto the book wouldn't be lost, or have to go back and track down the other 3 issues. And Mick was always a phenomenal writer.
Mm.
That was really his strong point. He was really good. Story structure was amazing, and all of that. So, and we found him an amazing artist. Had a incredibly professional inker on the work. The book was beautiful, right? Okay. But it was behind schedule. Mm-hmm. Right. We kick Corvus 1 out. It's great. We get all sorts of positive response. We solicit for Corvus 2, and we're trying to get ahead now, or at least get the book back up on schedule. Diamond calls us and tells us flat out they're not taking Corvus 2 because they have Corvus 1 through 3, even though the first 2 we didn't touch or we didn't print. Right. Already in their thing, and it was under their minimums. And they didn't want to, and we're like, did you see Corvus 1? Because Corvus 1 is a completely different project. That's why we put a number 1 on it. It's a completely, it looks different. It just shares the same name. Mm-hmm. Have you looked at the book? It's professional. It's a beautiful book. It's still a beautiful book. In fact, I ran a preview for Corvus 1 in the back of Spank 1. Mm. And used the Spank books were flip books because I never had enough time to do the whole book. So we took a couple of properties that we wanted to print and flipped it and put the other property on the backside. Mm. Well, anyway, no, they didn't want it. They were counting the first 3 Corvuses as your first 3 attempts. Number 4 was it. They didn't, or number 1, the new number 1, volume 2, number 1 was it. They didn't want a volume 2, number 2 at all. Wow. Everybody was blown. Just everybody's disheartened where things are mad. Mick's never done anything in comics since. Completely threw him out of comics completely. Abdul's disenchanted, leaves company. Dazan is mad and stops doing work. And or stops working for us. Well, you never paid me anything for the first one. Well, we would have paid you something, for the second one because the numbers were going to climb once they saw your great work on your first one. But anyway, that really threw us off. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do Spank the Monkey on the comic market. I'm going to make it a 3-part series and tell the beginning or the beginning, middle, and end of the comic industry. And at the end of issue 3, he sits there like this, flips everybody off, and we're done. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. And we went from there into collections. We collected War of the Worlds with a Scott Rosema cover. And I tried to get them to take on a collection of properties that I had done before I did Arrow Comics. From those Canadian guys that I mentioned never paid me. Mm-hmm. And I threw all of those together into a book and called it Zim's Heroic Tales and had it print on demanded, sent it to Diamond, got no word back onto whether or not they were going to solicit for it. So we're looking the next 3 previews trying to find the listing. It's not there.
Wow.
So finally we got a hold of them, or got a hold of our rep, and the Diamond rep literally told us we weren't going to solicit that book. How come you never let us know? Well, we didn't have to let you know. We're not going to solicit that book because it's a superhero book and you printed it in black and white. We're not going to touch it. Are you kidding me? Look at Southern Knights. Look at all of these other, Justice Machine. Look at all of this. No, not interested. No. So I ended up eating the cost. Luckily, I only printed 150. It was print on demand. So I ended up using that as almost like calling cards for the next couple of years to other publishers to go, I've got these 3 superhero properties I would love to do if you would let me print them, and we'll split the profits, which, literally didn't go anywhere. But I still have, there are still copies of that book floating around. Even though I threw it together pretty haphazardly, made notes on all of it, talked about what the character was or what the property was, and how I had developed it. And then on the back side of that, wrote out what I was going to do with the property and why it didn't come to fruition. Why, these guys gypped me. Or I had a property with Gauntlet Comics that was part of Caliber when Caliber did a Walmart deal, and they printed UN Force. There, I was going to be the next book in. I had a team book that was almost like Teen Titans that I was really proud of. Doug Lampersky did the artwork on that, and I did the pencil work on that. I did everything else on it, and it was really good. I had 2.5 issues done up of that, ready to go. So I ended up throwing that into the Heroic Tales book, and that was the last thing that was 2003, and then I got out. I stopped, and of course you can't stop.
Right.
It gets in your blood. You can't roll it away.
So what was next?
I ended up running my own business for a while, and with a couple of partners, we did an print apparel business for a little while, and that lasted a few years. And then we stopped that, and I started doing commercial work out of the basement. And I never stopped wanting to do comics. So, but I didn't want to deal with Diamond. Right. So I ended up doing, I got a copy here of it. I ended up doing my own comics newspaper.
Nice.
That I circulated around my county. I moved 10,000 copies of this paper every month. It was advertiser supported, so that we could cover the cost. We gave it away for free. We had red boxes, magazine boxes, newspaper boxes. You could walk up once a month and just grab a funny paper.
Wow.
We called it Flint Comics, and I ran it for 100 issues until the Flint water situation sprung up, and the advertising literally dried up, pun intended. Right. Because of that. But we had comics and entertaining articles in it. We had a whole group of people. I found a bunch of folks that I wanted to print, that I begged to let me print let me print their stuff in the paper, like Kurt Kulka's The Cardinal and Matt Fazell's Cynical Man was in it. We had a bunch of syndicated cartoons that are comics that I was able to get pretty inexpensively, and I actually ran some syndicated like Leo and Non Sequitur in here in there for a while too, and it was really a good paper. Got a lot of attention. That took me up to about April of last year.
Okay.
When we hit 100, I had to stop. It was to the point. Well, plus also beyond that, my commercial work had really picked up, and I had been doing a nature trail for a local nature preserve. I created a team of superheroes for them called the Preservers.
Nice.
Each of these superheroes represent a different aspect of conservation or preservation. They had come up with the types that they wanted for different subject matter, and then we created the heroes together. But the local Parks and Rec own all of the characters. So, and they have taken that and literally turned it. They've turned it out. They're doing all sorts of great stuff with it. They've done a little log book. They've done a couple of T-shirts. They even got the guys from Animal Planet's Treehouse Masters to come out and build a treehouse in the nature preserve that they turned into the preserver's headquarters.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, amazing. Just great. A lot of fun stuff. In fact, I did a video on it. I started a YouTube channel just as the paper was running, called Zim Geek, and I did a video on that showing what the trail was and what it was like. But you go out, like I said, it gets in the blood. Comics get in the blood, and you want to go out and spread comics out to people, no matter how you do it. If it's educational comics, it's educational comics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's funny, whimsical stuff, it's funny, whimsical stuff. So,
Yeah.
outside of that, I've taken a couple of the short story comics that I was doing, because most of the comics in the paper were short story stuff that we serialized or went through and spread out comic pages on. Here's a good example.
Right.
You can see that.
Yeah.
That's a character I did with Josh Harris. We were always looking for local talent. And Josh Harris has gone on to he's doing like a couple of graphic novels a year that he's kickstarting. He's really good. And we did a character together called Paragon. That was fun. Basic superhero type, superpowered character.
Right.
But took a bunch of the more whimsical stuff and collected it. I did a Hero Bot Zero volume, and I've got another character called Lindy Jax, which was the first character I actually had printed. My not really professional work, but in a fanzine that was called Just Imagine Comics and Stories. I created a little elf character that would trade for stuff, and I did up enough stories on that to put them together into a book. Did a bunch of Hero Bot Zero. Hero Bot's a little 3 foot tall giant robot with a bad attitude. That's how I describe it. Who goes around, fights giant monsters.
Right.
It's just fun little whimsical type stuff, and put a collection together of that. And now, I've got the Zim Geek channel. I do the Indie Volt radio thing, and I'm working on doing some crowdfunding, because this whole crowdfunding gig has really exploded within the last 10 years, and it's gotten to be a real interesting market that I want to see if I can put a dent in,
Now, let me ask you a question. All right, so obviously you've had problems with Diamond. I had problems with Diamond. They were for me.
Everybody had problems. That was in that green section. They made it on purpose. They gave people problems on purpose. Yeah. It was like we were the sadistic little whipping boys of our reps.
Yeah. I mean, I what's been happening, and I guess in the last 30 or 40 days, or what's happened, I don't have any tears for Diamond. They can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. But
I ran into a rep while I was doing the paper. The rep was going around visiting different shops, and I happened to land at a shop. Seriously, an advertiser with the paper since issue 1. And the guys at the comic shop were putting the paper underneath Diamond's nose. How come Diamond's not circulating a paper like this? This is awesome. This has got ads in it. And they figured that 85% of the people picking up the paper had never walked into their shop before. They had people walking in because they saw the ad in the paper wanting to know what a comic shop was. Right? Because Diamond never went around to try to educate anybody what comic shops were. They took their client base from 9,000 and now to probably less than 1,200 now. Yeah. All within a period of a few decades. Instead of trying to build the business, they just let it sit there and kept moving widgets out to whoever was left or whoever could jump through their hoops. And we were hearing, back when I was doing Arrow Comics, we were hearing so many crazy stories. Diamond charged $800 to get a cover image printed in previews. Diamond charged $600 to get my solicitation in previews. And we're like, what? What? That's not really, is that legal? Well, it's their publication. They can do whatever they want. Whether it happened or not, I don't know, but that's the story we got. Plus, we had retailers coming at us screaming that we were constantly shorting Diamond. We're like, no, we're not doing that. Diamond's doing that to you, and then they're blaming us. Well, they must have shorted us from their PO order, from their PO order. Oh, it was just irritating.
So now, but we have the new situation. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent. So I bumped into that rep, right? And I had a Caliber who did the first War of the Worlds series. Eric got a hold of me. I wasn't doing anything with the book, even though I had reprinted it in the past. I hadn't done anything with the first set of War of the Worlds, the first story. Eric wanted to reprint it, and I says, "Yeah, go ahead. I'll sign whatever paper you want." I was getting, a certain percentage of the profits, right? So, in exchange, the profits that I would end up getting was after print costs, after advertising costs, right?
Right.
So, and I got a great statement from Eric. I love Caliber. Gary Reed, when he was alive, treated me a lot better than I deserved at the time because I was a little shit to a lot of people. But Eric has always been above board and transparent with me. He sent me a detailed sheet of all of the deductions. I saw how much they paid Diamond for the ad, and there were it was 5 books at the time, because Diamond would only let Caliber solicit for 5 books at a time. That's all they allowed them to do. And you know Caliber, you know how long they've been out, how many products that they've done. They would only allow Eric to do 5 books at a time, right? So I paid for a fifth of the advertising. So I saw how much they paid Diamond for my fifth of that advertising. And I'm looking at my royalty check, and I said, fuck. Diamond made more money off of me again. And I told that flat out to the rep.
Right.
I said, you know, you're not worth my time. Because, and I explained to him the story, and me sitting there looking at this list of deductions and looking at this check and going, Diamond made more money off of me again. And that we had figured out, well, while we were scrimping and saving, Diamond was pulling their percentage off as the middleman, taken from point A to point B. They were making more profit than we were. That was one of the reasons I stopped doing Arrow.
Yeah.
Because they didn't care about us. They just wanted to move that widget from point A to point B. That's all they gave a crap about. And again, like I said, to an ever-shrinking client base. So we quickly found out we were pulls only, because we were in the green section. So we had to go out and appeal to anybody. I started out Arrow with very genre specific books, just like the first Arrow. We did an Oz book, a War of the Worlds book, a Wonderland book, and an anthology. That was the first 4 books that we did. Once I realized that nobody was putting us on their shelves, because Diamond was not encouraging anybody at that point to do anything with anybody in the green side. Well, you got extra money, you need to buy the next variant cover, you know? I started printing books that I had to print from specific people that I thought we could return a profit on.
Right.
So, and even then it got to the point where I was disappointing people. I had to call up and go, dude, your book only pulled down 500 and we need 800 in order to break even. I'm not going to be able to print your book. You know, and it just got to be so disheartening I had to stop.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you. I mean, I've been there. I was there, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, but in your estimation, you've been around for a minute. You know, do you think this situation that's going on with Lunar or, you know, DCBS and Midtown Comics, do you think that's going to improve things? I mean, obviously, you know, we're talking fantasies here. We don't actually know. We'll probably suss it out in a year or so. But what are your thoughts?
You can't second guess how this business is going to go, because I've seen it go in so many crazy directions. You know, who knew 10 years ago that crowdfunding would be at the position that it's at now? Who knew that the crowdfunding would literally million, you know, $100,000 book projects. Who knew? Nobody knew. Nobody could suspect. And that's all money that's skipping Diamond, and unfortunately is skipping the retailers at the same time, which is bucking the system. But these guys are getting profit, you know, for their work. That's amazing. That's great. You know, and then some of these guys are being paid infinitely better than what Marvel and DC would pay them on a page rate. So why would they want to go back? The whole system has to shift and revolve. And what that means, I'm not sure. I know a few things that I would love to try. You know, if DC were to call me up tomorrow and say, hey, we need a reprint editor, how would you like to be our reprint editor for 3 years? Or for 2 years, and you'd have a certain budget, and you could do a certain amount of products, I would literally drop everything I was doing, move wherever I needed to move in order to get that job done, and start printing as many 100-page super spectaculars as I possibly could, and moving them in as many different places as I possibly could, because I know they would sell and they would make really hard money. And there's so much stuff out there that needs to be seen that in comics from the mainstream even that. Nobody wants that stuff out there anymore, because they're busy selling the dark, angst-ridden, boring stuff. You know, but does that mean cheaper comics? Probably. Does that mean more comics? Absolutely. Does that mean a wide variety of formats? Let's hope so, because I'm so tired of seeing the same freaking comic that fits into the same bag with the same board and the same box at the same show. You know, I love oddball comics. I've got a big little book collection that I'm really proud of, because they're real easy to find anymore, because anybody that used to know what they looked like or what they were are all passing away. So
Right.
unfortunately, I'm finding books I used to see at show for $130, big little books that I'm picking up for $8-9. So
Right.
I'm really happy to pay that. But I like oddball format sequential art. Half size, Garfield size books, paperback books, whatever. If I haven't seen it or haven't read it, I'm probably going to pick it up. But Archie was kicking out a set of Marvel digests that were sitting at the grocery stores. Every
Right.
time a new Marvel movie came out, they had a new digest sitting there. And granted, half of that stuff was dark and abysmal because it was printed from the shiny paper that Varian was talking about onto newsprint, and it dulled up. But
Right.
you could look at the side of the book and tell where the old stuff ended and the new stuff started, because the new stuff all had black borders on it, and you really got ink all over your fingers.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Uh,
But yeah, there needs to be more unusual formats, and comics need to go out in as many diverse places as possible. And the retail shops have really got to build themselves up. I hate I hate the expression community hub, which I think somebody was trying to pass around not too long ago. But they really need to become the genre hub of the neighborhood, and there needs
right.
to be, what, 3, 4, 5 times as many
At minimum.
retail shops back up, minimal,
Yeah.
in
It-
order
I'm-
to make that direct market substantial again.
Yeah, I'm in New York City. So Midtown Comics
Yeah.
was obviously my local bookshop. I have a one called Royal Collectibles. They have 2 shops out here in Queens.
Okay.
But when I grew up, I had Super Snipe, which was like one of the earliest comic shops around.
Named after an awesome comic too.
Yeah. But in the same area, I had East Side Comics, the Batcave, Action Comics, and then on the west side was West Side Comics. And this was what? The early 80s?
Yeah.
Maybe the late 70s.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I was a kid. I was like 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had 5 or 6. I mean, I had 4 or 5 comic book stores.
Yep.
Now I have Midtown Comics, Forbidden Planet. What is it? The shadow of what was Jim Hanley's universe, or JH universe. I mean, it's still a nice shop, but it's like a shadow of what it once was.
Yeah.
And then there was what is it? There was one all the way down in the Village. They recently went out of business, but it's like, it's just a handful of shops.
Yeah.
For a city of like 9 million people,
Yeah.
with 20 million people normally flowing through the city every day.
Right.
I mean, it's like it's nothing.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, back in the 90s, you couldn't walk 10 blocks without hitting a comic book store. And I mean,
And now
it's crazy.
the outlets that Diamond used to cater to is about a sixth of what they used to be.
Right.
It's inexcusable. There's no reason that the market should be that small.
Yeah.
Just
but
but it's because nobody cares. There's been so much ambivalence in the market. Well, we're still catering to the same audience that, up until the Marvel about 2004 or so, or during the Gemus age, probably. They decided that they were going to be diverse and go out and grab whoever else. It was always, your comics are made for this demographic, primarily this, primarily that. Everybody fit that pigeonhole, and that's all that Diamond was interested in catering to. 25 to 55 years old, mostly male, mostly white. Everything else was just fringe.
Yeah.
Like I tell everybody, I remember doing comics conventions first 10, 15, 20 years. Girls were scarce.
Right.
I was stunned. I was stunned. I kept having a girl come into my comic shop, let alone one that was hitting on me,
Yep.
So I was like, that was a keeper to me, Luckily,
definitely.
luckily it really was. But
I got lucky like that too.
she's got more long boxes than I do, but that's the way it works.
That's
which is
the way
fine.
sometimes works.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
All right.
the market has opened up a lot over the years, but the comic shops have shrunk. Doesn't make logical sense. There
Not at
needs
all.
to be female-oriented comic shops. There needs to be neighborhood-oriented comic shops catering to whatever. There are still segregated neighborhoods out there, but that shouldn't keep people from reading comics.
No.
You know, I used to love reading comics that were as diverse as possible just to get other viewpoints, to see other places and lose myself in other worlds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why isn't that going on now? Well, because so-and-so is such and such an ism and can only write these characters. It's like, no,
Right.
that's not the way this is supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing in a wonderful art form of fantasy and sometimes whimsy, sometimes reality, sometimes, you know, realistic stuff. There should be, like in literally anywhere else but North America, every type of comic out there for every type of person and every type of genre, just sequential art just everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how this market's going to grow.
Yeah, but it's going to take a lot to get there. I mean, but we'll see, though. I think,
Amazingly, I don't think it's going to be as hard as they thought. If only somebody in authority would just sit down and put the damn effort into it.
I don't know.
I found out, this is what I found out. Let me tell you, when I did this paper,
Right.
I had 10,000. I printed 10,000 copies. Anything else anything that was unreadable that I pulled from the boxes, I recycled.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything else that was readable, I did comic conventions and gave it away.
Right.
People love comics. People will read comics. If the price point is accessible, they'll eat it up, and then they'll become fans. I was at a rock and roll festival here in Flint, and I'm sitting there pushing Flint comics. I got a table drape, and I'm handing out comics left and right. 3 motorcycles come riding in. This big guy who's like twice as big as me gets off, sees my table, comes running up to me, you know, takes his helmet off, big biker dude. I mean, we're talking, I'm like, you know, you know, because there's some real shit kickers up here. It's Flint, you know.
Right.
The guy goes, "Do you do that Flint Comics paper?" And I'm like, "Oh shit." You know, I'm running through my mind, what the hell did we print that he's pissed at me about, you know? I said, yes, I do, you know. And he goes, "I got to show you something." And he wheels up he pulls up his sleeve, and along his arm, he's got one of the Leo comic strips tattooed. He says, "I got that from your paper. It's awesome. Leo is awesome."
That's funny.
Like, dude, you know, that was incredible. I think I took pictures of it and actually printed it in the paper. But we got reactions from everybody off of that paper. Young, old, I mean, really old, 90, 80, 90. We ran Flash Gordon in the paper. We had people coming up. I never read Flash Gordon. I knew who he was, you know, or I haven't read Flash Gordon since I was a kid. We got a lot of that too. People want to read comics. They want to read sequential art. It just has to be accessible to them. And that's been part of the problem. We've been in a hole and now that I'm seeing out there where some of these, some people are going, "Well, I'm too scared to walk into a comic shop because they're a bastion of misogyny and masculinity." It's like, well, then you got to make one that isn't, and put the coolest shit that you want to sell in there and sell the hell out of it, please. Because we need this market as wide open as we possibly can. And we need to beat the stigma. We need to get past, and comics have always had a stigma. Always. Yes. You go back through comics history, you see that. It's just a lot of, you know, "Oh, it's just kiddie trash," or "This doesn't mean anything," or "What do you mean this is $5?" That's a big one now. What do you mean this is $5? Flip. You know, you got to go out there and find an accessible price point.
Right.
Make it make money, and have people read you long enough to follow you. And I had people calling me if I was a day late on getting this paper out from when they thought, because I also ran an ad in here for my commercial business, which really took off when I was doing the paper. I had guys calling me up. "Hello? Where's the paper?" "Who is this?" "Don't worry about who I am. Where's the paper?" And I'm not lying. That actually happened. I had to start a Flint Comics Facebook page.
Right.
In order to tell people, I'm putting the paper together now. The paper's gone to the printer. The paper's at the distributor. The paper's distributed on the street. Hope you can find a copy. You know, I had to do that almost at every stage, especially if I was running late. And there were times that I ran late. But thank goodness, and varying, Unlike the slick paper, I was printed on cheap newsprint. I was the size of a newspaper. I was printed off of an incredibly large web press that was 15, 20 minutes away from my house. I took them every issue personally on a disc to have them printed. They would turn this paper around literally overnight.
Wow.
I could get the paper if I had the files to them by 5 p.m. They had it sitting at my distributor, which was my printer was about 15, 20 minutes to the south of me. My main distributor's main office was about 15 minutes to the north of me. They had it at the distributor by like 3 in the afternoon the next day, ready to go. And there were times that I distributed a few places myself personally. You know, the comic shops are advertisers, a couple of red boxes in my hometown, that kind of thing. And there were times that I could walk out of there with the newsprint literally all over my hands, just solid black. Loved every minute of it because I knew people were picking this thing up and they were loving it. You know.
Just out of curiosity, if you don't mind me asking,
we need more of this.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, what was something like that costing you per issue?
I got the estimates up there. I got the page separations, and I was spending about $1,200 for 10,000.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's what, 12 cents a sheet?
Wasn't that expensive? Yeah, it wasn't that expensive. You know, and you just had that figured my advertising was not that expensive either. A little a full color 1/8 of a page ad was like $75.
Right. Gotcha.
You know, a black and white ad was $50. And if they came in on a regular basis, especially if they paid us in advance, we cut them another 20% off. A full page ad, like on the back of the paper, was $500. If we ever ran a full page thing.
Right.
But those ads were big. You see how big that is? That's a quarter page.
They're huge. Yeah. No, that's awesome.
That's Donna's Donuts, by the way. Best donuts in town. I did that artwork. That's that guy there is used to be the owner of one of the big comic shops here in Flint, and he ended up inheriting his parents' donut business.
There you go.
Yeah,
it's a lot of money in donuts. So.
Surprisingly, yes, there's a lot of money in donuts.
Yes.
And now his daughter runs the business now. So.
All right, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we've been at this for a little while. We're coming close to the end of this, but we're not at the end. I got a few more questions for you. All right, now, The first question, before we move on to anything else, is: Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think I blabbered on enough.
Okay.
I can't think of anything.
Fair enough.
It's just that a lot of the commercial work that I've done, some of the preservers led me to a national gig where I was able to charge these people like a lawyer. Right. How much are you going to charge us in order to do this national campaign for the National Recreation and Parks Association? When they first told me, it's like, National Parks? Cool. Do I get to make a tour? That would be awesome. No, it's not the same guys. This is a National Recreation and Parks Association, and they cater to all of the parks and recs all over the country. And they did a promotional push the year after the first Preservers came out, where I got to create another group of superheroes that they own. I got to charge them for the rights of the character. I created those characters up from a rougher outline. I did a whole story off of a really bare outline, only 6 pages, but they paid incredibly well. Good. And they own the characters. So I had them I signed away the characters for a fee. And I was able to charge them, like I said, like a lawyer. I had a really good year that year. And I got a drunk text from them. And the reason I know it was that way, because it was a little garbled. It took me a little bit to figure out, but they sent pictures that they did a national, an association. There's an association awards once a year where they give out notice for prizes for successful campaigns from the other different associations, you know, up there in Washington. Right. And we won most unique presentation. And then we won the big award that they weren't expecting. And that's why I got the text. They were supposed to send me a copy of the award, and they never did. But it was like the ultimate for the year. This is the coolest campaign for the year. And they won that award, and that was apparently really big and very prestigious. So we were like, hey, we won this and this. And I'm trying to decipher what they said, but they sent a picture. Somebody had taken a shot as they showed the slide on the wall as they were going to get their prize. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And then,
that's awesome.
you know, they haven't used the character since, but, you know, it was kind of cool. I can officially say that I'm an award-winning commercial graphic sequential artist. So.
Awesome. All right, cool. All right, so now we're gonna move on to some of my weird questions.
And that campaign went all over the country. They had that 6-page story. They had it as part of their campaign. It was to promote Parks and Recs. So anyway,
cool. All right, now like I said, we're gonna move on to some of my weirdo questions.
That's
so,
fine.
You know, let's hit these up.
You know what we do on Indy Volt? We handle the strangest questions you can imagine. So
I could imagine.
There's probably nothing that you can throw at me that Varian hasn't already done.
Okay, cool. Fair enough.
Or not as bad. I doubt it will ever be as bad.
All right. So now, you're a publisher, you're a creator. Now, if you had the choice of any artist that you have a deep knowledge of this, any artist you could get to do a cover for you, living or dead, don't worry about budget. Who would you get? Living or dead? Living or dead. We'll pull them out of the ether for you.
It would all be oddball. Probably mostly dead artists. I would have loved to have even to have spent a dinner with C.C. Beck or Jack Cole. Jack Cole especially, because he passed before I was really into comics. I mean, I was alive when he passed, but I would have loved to have met him because my appreciation for him is just leaps and bounds. I got to meet a lot of these guys. I made a point of it, actually. I realized that it got to a point for me where I was sitting behind a table selling my book, coming in, selling my book, leaving.
Right.
A lot. So, and a lot of especially when we were running into trouble with Diamond, a lot of the magic and just sheer joy that I had from comics was gone. So I went out and got a sketch pad, not a sketch pad, but a sketch book, hardcover book. And I went around to a lot of the people that I deeply appreciated and enamored by and had them sign the inside or back cover of the book.
Right.
So I got a lot of autographs that way. Got to shake a lot of hands and tell a lot of people that I really appreciate their stuff. Joe Staten. I got a big appreciation for the unique artists that have a very distinguishable style. Ross Andrew, Nick Carty. And that really comes to mind because I was talking about that on Facebook earlier today. Would have always loved to have met Frank Robbins because when I was a kid growing up reading The Invaders, I hated him. I mean, just absolutely. I hated Robbins. I hated Kirby I hated Robbins and Kirby especially with a passion, deep passion. Right. Until I got older and was able to sit down and actually look at what the heck they were doing. And I'm like, oh, this stuff is amazing. So, yeah, I was that guy digging through the quarter boxes going, oh, Human Fly number 6. This is awesome. Doing that kind of stuff. But Robbins, I would have loved to have met. Lee Elias would have loved to have met. There's just a lot of those guys out there. Jack Cole, I'm still... Cole and Beck are the two big ones because Plastic Man and the original Captain Marvel to me is just amazing. Kurt Schaffenberger I met once. He was amazing. Kirby I almost met once. I did get to meet, my biggest hero was Will Eisner. And I got to meet him a couple of times and he floored me because the second time I met him he remembered who I was and what I had printed. And what I had done. He shook my hand when he saw me. I was passing him in the hall. I was going to say, oh, here comes Will Eisner. I'm just going to say hello, Mr. Eisner. So it's like, hello, Mr. Eisner. And he goes, Randy, how you doing, buddy? How's Arrow Comics going? How's this, And I'm like, oh, okay. What do you do? But yeah, he that really floored me immensely. I would have loved to have worked for him at one point or another.
Yeah.
And he's a big. I don't know if you could really call him a mentor because he never directly spoke to me, but I've read all of his books and I have all of the Spirit archives. I always recommend the Comics and Sequential Art book to anybody who wants to learn how to do graphic storytelling because it's the textbook to me. I'm still learning. I'm still learning from him, and that's part of the fun.
Daphne went to the School of Visual Arts and he was actually teaching at the time. She took his course.
That would.
And I actually got to sit in on a class,
Yeah.
which was pretty awesome. So he was a very nice
Okay.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always impressed me as a great, nice guy.
So you still didn't answer my question. Who would you
Sorry.
get to do your cover?
If I got to ink it, any of those guys that I listed,
Okay.
Kirby would be great. Ditko would have been phenomenal. I always wanted to meet Ditko. I was really hoping, and I never was able to, but I would have loved to have printed Mr. A in the paper.
Oh, wow,
his
yeah.
Mr. A character, white is white, black is black, and there is no gray. Just amazing work. And again, he's somebody that I didn't really hate. I didn't hate his stuff, but the older you get, the more you deeply appreciate it. There's nothing. A cover would have to be Nick Cardy. Because Nick Cardy's composition on covers is just unmatched. I'm in awe of Jim Aparo for his inking and his sound effects. I stole most of the sound effect work that I ever do in comics is always inspired by Jim Aparo sound effects. And you go, Jim, sound effects? Well, it makes you go back and look. Those are amazing because Jim would take a script and he would take a script and you'd get a finished page when he was done. Right. So he would do except for lettering, he would do sound effects, pencils and inks. And his inking style is super unique and very much his own. He's the kind of guy who could squish a pen and you'd get a shadow under a nose, or squish a brush. I mean, squish,
right.
And he'd just sit there, squish. There's a nose shadow. Alex Nino is another one that I'm crazy about, and that I can't look at enough of his stuff. But it's those kind of guys that have their own. Just you can't help but when you see the stuff, you go, oh, that's Alex Nino. That's cool. Yeah. That kind of stuff. I would love to work with. And I really tried as I was self-publishing to go out and find those artists that were like that had a very unique style, very individual style. I got lucky to work with, Doug Lampersky and Chris Tyson on The Fool, and Gary Thomas Washington, especially. They found out he just passed not too long ago. And he did a book for me that was another one of those books up in Canada that they told me how great it was and asked me to send them a second one. And I said, no, not unless you send me a profit check for the first one. So,
yeah.
But yeah, did I still not answer your question?
No, you. I think you somewhat got it. It's good. So all right, let's move on to the next one. So, if you got the call up from the big companies and they basically gave you a golden ticket and they said, Randy, pick any title, any book, right?
Yeah.
Which would be the book you would want to write, illustrate, ink, however you want to do it. Which would be the book you'd want to do?
If it was DC, I'd have to think for a while because they've got a lot of their catalog's a lot more diverse than Marvel's is. If it was Marvel, it would probably be Killraven, without a doubt.
Oh, okay.
I would love to pick that up because the Killraven's a real interesting property that you can't. He went literally from Neil Adams to not George Tuska, Herb Trimpe, who was working at his Hulk individual style, to P. Craig Russell. So you went from gorgeous commercial work to the most bizarre looking superhero work to the most tender, beautiful operatic work that you could ever imagine. And then everybody else that's come after McGregor and Russell have never quite gotten there and gotten the character correct in my mind. And they've had Alan Davis took a whack at it and didn't quite make it. And there's supposedly a 4-issue miniseries that Rob Liefeld did that Marvel is sitting on that is supposed to take a whack at him. And some of that artwork that Rob has shown that's amazing. And I would love to read that book sometime. But Killraven would be it. I was always a big fan of the oddball characters. So the big three at Marvel would be Killraven, Ulysses Bloodstone, and probably Monarch Starstalker.
Wow.
If you know who those guys are. That's a deep cut.
That's a deep cut. That is.
Whenever I find, and Monarch Starstalker was Howard Chaykin. It was a one-shot Marvel premiere. Whenever I find that book anywhere in anybody's boxes and it's like a couple of bucks, I buy it. And then I hand it to somebody, some kid. Son, I just kicked out my first comic book. Well, son, if you ever read Monarch Starstalker, you need to sit down and read this. This is a whole story, full character build-up with a very difficult origin. a very deep origin, and a full entertaining story inside of one comic. Try to do that. Right. See if you can squeeze all that stuff together like Chaykin did, you know. And Chaykin also, when he's on, is incredibly good. And especially back during that period, because he was a lot looser than what he is now, and a little bit less curmudgeon-y, you know. It's just phenomenal stuff. DC, on the other hand, I've always had a fondness for Phantom Stranger, and always thought that Phantom Stranger is the TV series that everybody would watch that DC just doesn't seem to want to do. That it just dismays me. And the Paul Kirk Manhunter, the Walt Simonson, Archie Goodwin. Did you ever read that?
Yes, I got them to sign it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Good for you. I've never had Simonson ever sign anything for me. I would love to meet him sometime. I've just never been at a show that he's been at. And he's another one whose style that I just love when he's on. He's really on. Yeah. And Goodwin, I almost had breakfast with him once, which meant I was at a show and he was at the table next to us, and we kind of said a few things back and forth.
Right.
You know, and Archie was an amazing, from what I understand, an amazingly nice human being. Yes. And just a phenomenal person. So, but that property is another property that you sit there and you go, how come nobody's updated this thing? Because this is a hell of a story. It's a great hook. It's a really cool storyline, and you know, at least one of the streaming services should have caught you. Maybe you're not going to run around in a red ninja outfit,
right?
You know, with big fluffy shoulders and an incredibly large knife tucked up your sleeve that doesn't make much sense. But when you flicked your arm out, you had this incredibly long Bundy knife dagger pop out. Maybe you won't have that. But the concept and the characters just, and the idea, that's the way you reboot a superhero, you know, and turn him into something completely different and fresh and new and have an interesting look. And that last story, I still read Manhunter every once in a while. When Ollie's had their big sale, when DC and Marvel did a big dump at Ollie's, and they were selling books, I went in and bought all of the gold Manhunter collections and like the Monarch Starstalker stuff. I took them around to people. Have you ever read this? You need to sit and read this. This is awesome. You know, take this book. I only paid $2 for it.
Right.
You know, it's a $10 book retail. Ollie's had it for $2. So I'm like, I'm buying all of them. You know, and then I handed them. I throw a couple conventions a year. And have a bunch of friends there setting up. And back when I was doing Flint Comics, anybody who contributed to Flint Comics got a free table because I wasn't paying them to put stuff in the Flint Comics. I was just kind of surviving from issue to issue. But one of the fringes for working on the papers, you got a free table at the show.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, twice a year. And I would go around to them and go, have you read this Manhunter book? You need to read this. This actually won awards back when it was out. And it's really tight, 7-page installments, except for that last issue. And that last issue has all of the characterization that they wanted to do. And you could tell that Goodwin had this long story figured out where this character is just going to be worn down to nothing. And like he says in the book, every time, and it's a guy chasing after a whole legion of his own clones. Every time I killed one of those clones, I knew I was killing a piece of myself. That's profound. You know, and it was slowly driving him crazy. And he knew it. And at the end, he sacrifices himself. The big complex blows up, which most evil laboratories do. When the when the hero wins, boom, the laboratory explodes. And that was just an amazing piece of work all around. Plus, Simonson's artwork was phenomenal during that time.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet Archie a couple times in Manhattan. I was like 12. I was 14.
You had the advantage of being in New York. I was always around the Flint area. So
yeah, and he was. I mean, I only wish I could have spent more time around this guy because every single time I was with him, he would spend time with me. He would sign my books, and there would always be another guy holding a portfolio, and Archie would take the portfolio, look at the portfolio, and he let me stand next to him as he critiqued this guy's portfolio, and I learned a great deal at the you know.
I bet you did.
I mean, I was just like, wow, because this, I mean, just as I looked at the stuff and I was like, it's incredible. And Archie would be like, no, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And he would just start chopping the guy up. But
Each portfolio review was a masterclass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really was.
I can see that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know,
So,
and then,
so different from another. I did a New York show one time, and I saw somebody who will remain nameless because it's not going to be a nice story. Literally rip a guy's portfolio apart. Not literally, but pretty to the point where the guy was bawling in front of him.
Oh.
And it's like, if you can't handle it, son, maybe you shouldn't be in this business.
Was his name Neil Adams?
How did you know? Is that an ear? That's not an ear. An ear, it's got full dimension in it, and it's got this and this, and holy crap! I'm sitting there just stunned, like, gee,
Yeah.
I've never looked at the guy right since.
Yeah, Neil is legendary for that here in New York. He's legendary.
Screaming tears, just oh my god! But it was at that show I had my buddy take his sketchbook up to this new guy who had just started working at DC. I'm like, you need to get a picture from this guy. You need to get a sketch from this guy because he's going to be hot. That was Joe Quesada.
There you go.
Yeah. And I was at the time I was selling. I'm pretty sure it was Arrow. No, that was probably during the time between 1 and 3. But I was literally back to back to Lee Falk, and all I had to do was turn around and shake his hand, and that's one of my biggest regrets of never doing, because I'm a big Strip fan, and I have a deep appreciation for Lee Falk's work, and I'm very sorry that I never got to meet the guy or shake his hand, and I still regret that to this day.
Gotcha. Well,
and he was right there. He's right there.
Yeah. That's kind of like me with Dave Stevens. I have a tin of The Rocketeer, which is a painting, and we would see him every year. We went to the show for like 8 years running, and I would see him every year. And I would keep saying, I'm going to bring this tin. I'm going to get him to sign and bring this tin. And then he
passed unexpectedly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, son, wow.
Yeah. I was at a few shows that he was at, and I never did get anything signed from him. I did get a signature from Doug Wilde.
Okay.
I think it's last name, Wilde or Wilde.
Yeah.
I sat next to him at a New York show, and I'm like, dude, my youth, you're Johnny Quest. That's all that's all I got to say. Said that, and thank you. Thank you very much for that. Holy crap.
No, those guys are awesome. All right. So
now a lot of us guys, we do these shows all the time. These conventions. Well, now we're not.
Well,
and we'll miss it. But when we get back to doing the shows, we have to remember there's people out there that aren't. Your time on this earth is so short. So incredibly short. John Buscema I never got to meet,
right?
And regret. I've got to talk to Joe Jusko a few times. I'm enamored by his work. He's amazing. You got to go around and remember why you're in this business, and thank some of these people, because they're not. You might not see them again if they're at a show. I was at a show twice with Kirby. I said hello to him once, but never got anything signed from him.
Yeah.
And you never know these guys like Eisner who are going to recognize you and know exactly what you do, because they're just as big a fans as you are.
Yeah.
So the first time I met Stan Lee, I took some of the masterworks to have him sign, and I had some copies, and this is when Arrow had just in its first year.
Right.
And Stu and I were standing in line, and we went through this big, long, winding line through this hotel in order to get Stan. He would only sign 3 things. Well, back then he was signing for free, because he'd just sit there and sign. How you doing, kid? Sign this. We got up to the line, and George Perez was sitting next to Stan, and I had brought a couple of copies of each Tales from the Aniverse, and I gave a set to Stan, and I was going to give a set to George. George literally jumped out of his chair and said, "You're Randy Zimmerman. You do Tales from the Aniverse. Your stuff is great." And I was like, your stuff's great too, George. What do you do?
Yeah. Exactly. No, I mean,
but yeah, you have to remember to be a fan. You really do. Don't let that time waste away or slip by you.
Yeah, because the last time I saw Bernie Wrightson was literally, I think, 6 months before he passed. I saw him I saw him at Boston
Dude.
Comic Con.
I'm gonna swing my camera around here and show you a duck. I've got a duck right there, still in the mesh netting. Okay, I have it hanging on my wall. I look at it every day.
Yeah.
I gophered for Bernie for 3 years.
Wow.
They flew me out to San Diego, 2000 to 2003. Right, his reps flew me out to San Diego. I got to be his bodyguard and sell his work. Right, and be his gopher. It would take back then, and this is how this 2003. It took 20 minutes to walk from wall to wall in San Diego if you moved and never stopped, and you were constantly ducking and weaving and walking, because at that point it was 45 rows wide by 5 rows deep. You know, and if Mr. Wrightson needed a coffee, I got a coffee. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I got to meet a lot of really famous people during those 3 years. I was only working there half the time, and they would let me go out and talk to everybody else. So I got to meet, got to talk to Bob Schreck for a while, and a few people that I was talking on the boards with. But yeah, I got to hang around with Bernie enough so that I ended up selling a really, really major piece of his artwork to a guy. And at San Diego, you never know who's going to walk up to you, And then this guy come up and looked at me and says, "I want the ideal piece of Bernie Wrightson." I says, "Well, then you need this piece." And I pulled it out. It was on Duo Shade board, and it was illustration he did for a Robert Bloch, I believe, anthology. And it had everything that was Wrightson. Dinosaur, mad scientist in a lab, eerie stuff. It was everything. It was for an anthology book that he had done, and it literally had everything Wrightson was known for. The guy looked at that piece and said, "Gotta have it," and slid me his gold card. And Bernie saw that happen, and he leaned over to me and goes, "I owe you a favor." And I said, "Okay, dude, I was going to have him do a cover for a book that I was going to do. I was going to pull it in. I was saving it for just the right occasion. And of course, when you do that, they end up passing before you can collect. But I ended up leaving something behind that he had to send me a package, and he had one of those ducks in his bathroom. And I said, "That devil duck is so freaking awesome, as I have never seen that before. It's a rubber ducky that looks like a devil."
Right.
I said, that's really cool. And he goes, "Well, if I find one, I'll send it to you." And he sent me a package back. I think it was my VCR that I had over there at the time. Long story, but we were setting it up for a display or whatever. He ended up mailing it back to me, and in the middle of the bubble wrap was that bag,
the ducky?
duck in a bag. Yeah, never taken it out of the card. Just it's hung on the wall ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
But I got to know him for a couple of 3 very long San Diegos. So yeah,
well,
it was a good time.
Because I like I said, the last time I saw him was probably about 6 months before he passed. I saw him. I didn't even know he was going to be at the show. I bought a print, got him to sign it for me. I got it hung up in my living room.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it was just like, because I saw him and I saw the condition he was in. I was like, I may never see this man ever again. It broke my heart. It broke my heart.
Well, he was never in the best of health. Even when I was gophering for him, that's why I was there. Right. I ran a little bit of security. And mostly fetch it type stuff, but I knew enough of his work that I could sell it.
Right.
So, and he had, at that time, he was doing pre-production drawings for a lot of movies. In fact, he sold a lot of Galaxy Quest illustrations. I got to see he had a job where he was drawing before Raimi got Spider-Man. Sony was asking for pictures of a guy in a Spider-Man suit so that they could try to see how realistic they could get it. He had done a series of drawings for that, a series of drawings for Ghost Rider. Some stuff he could sell, some stuff he couldn't sell. He was learning at the time that some of the guys were hoarding his artwork, so he would get around to send scans or copies after that, so that he always had the originals with him. And then he was selling them for a good amount. Yeah. And the last time I went with him, he was painting doing a series of paintings for one of the Stephen King Dark Tower novels.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tremendous experience.
Nah, it sounds incredible, man. All right, so let's get on to some of these other weirdo questions I have. These are
I got all night if you have to. I can just jabber on. So just stop me if I go.
Well, no, we're gonna do these and then we'll call it a night.
Up to you.
All right. So these are comparatives. I'll softball you, and then we'll work into some of what some people consider the hard ones, but we'll see.
All right.
Godzilla or Gamera?
Probably Gamera. I always call it Gamora.
Uh-huh.
But yeah.
Okay. Kirby or Ditko?
When I was younger, it was Ditko. The older I got, the more I appreciated Kirby. Now it's definitely Kirby with Ditko close behind.
Gotcha.
Nothing can compare to Kirby's imagination, because you would sit there and look at some of that stuff and go, "What the heck was he on?" You know, I cry though. I've collected a lot of his stuff since then, and any Thor that I find that Vince Colletta inked, I cry because I go, "This could have looked so much better."
This is true.
I don't hold Colletta in very high regard.
No, I've seen a couple documentaries, and they're like, yeah, that was not the guy. That was not the guy.
Well, he was when you needed it done overnight.
That
was the guy. So,
yeah, if you needed it now, he was the guy.
Well, they were in a tight deadline business, so yeah. Anyway.
Captain America or Batman?
Captain America.
Okay.
Always. I got offered by Bob Schreck the times I was out in San Diego. Schreck said, "You could write a Batman story for me. I'd print it," because he knew my stuff.
Right.
Says, "We'll work it out. We'll get it done. Just come up with a Batman story, and I'll work with you." And I said, "Dude, I can't do Batman, because Batman everything has been done that can be done with Batman." But Cap always had that extra little power of throwing that shield around.
Right.
That was everybody has geek boy moments when they're watching these movies, and when he's on that ocean liner right before he meets Batroc, and he's taking all those people out by throwing that shield around, that was a hardcore geek boy moment for me. I'm sitting there going, that's exactly what that would look like. Exactly. He'd be running through there, throwing the shield every place, catching it, throwing it again, and just constantly moving. Boom, that guy's gone. Boom, that guy's gone. That was a real Kirby moment for me. Because that reminded me of the old Tales of Suspense story where he was taking out all those Nazis before he bumped into Batroc, I believe it was. Yeah.
George St. Pierre. That was the actor. He was an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle or Agatha Christie?
Conan Doyle.
Okay.
Without a doubt. Agatha Christie, nice whodunits, but Conan Doyle wrote a character. Agatha Christie wrote a few characters also, don't get me wrong, but Doyle, I think, lived Sherlock Holmes. He knew him probably totally intimately, more intimately than what he ever wrote. And you could get that vibe. Both him and Watson, he had him down. And Christie would just tell interesting whodunits stories, and they're both great, but Doyle. Yeah, Doyle.
Yeah, I think I had a spate between like 13 and 15 where I think I read like 8 or 9 of her books, and I just loved them, and I would just reread them, and it was just like it was just weird. I was just like, but they were fantastic books. Asimov or Heinlein?
That's a rough one.
Yeah.
Heinlein did Starship Troopers.
Yes.
Early in his youth. I would have to say Asimov because of Foundation and Foundation Trilogy. Yeah. That's a series of books that's never going to get met.
Right. No, they were incredible.
Who is it? Apple is adapting those, and it looks amazing. And that if they remotely hit the books, if they hit 20% of those Foundation books, it will be a great series.
Right.
That's how good they are.
Yeah. I can tell you my other Zimmerman story.
Okay.
This is all right. I have Howard.
Okay.
Howard Zimmerman.
All
right. I think he was okay, because I have a friend, his name is Steve. He used to be an EIC over at I'm forgetting the company, but Howard was his mentor there. Right? And he got this story.
Okay. Howard used to run Tops, right?
No, he was Starlog.
Okay. Oh, all right. Got it.
Yeah. So he interviewed Isaac Asimov, and he said he walked into his living room. He had 7 typewriters in a circle. Yeah, each with a different story.
I've heard that. I've heard that story before. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, that was insane.
I think for Asimov that was a constant, though.
Yeah, I think
I think
so
he
too.
was always going because he could jump. He did so many different things, though.
Mm-hmm.
All he'd have to do is look at the typewriter and look at where he was and decide whether he was going to continue it or not.
Yeah.
So
Just the guy was incredible.
yeah,
All right, Byrne or Perez?
another rough one.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had Perez do the 50th cover for
Oh.
Flint Comics.
Nice.
Got lucky. Got somebody knew him a lot better than I did, but he still knew who I was, and he liked the paper a lot, and he liked what I was doing with the paper. So he did it under the condition that the one of the contributors had to ink it, and she was young at the time. She was 16, 17 years old, and that was that was kind of a hairy moment. But we ended up getting Paul Sizer to do the colors on it, and it was just a beautiful piece of work. And she did an amazing job on it. Lane Toth was the inker on it. Just beautiful. Byrne, on the other hand, I've always had I love his work, his early work especially. In fact, I had a piece of Champions for the longest time that that Layton inked, Bob Layton. And that both of them apparently hate each other because Byrne looked at it and says, "You like this shit?" And then he signed it. And then I got it to Layton, and Layton looked at it and said, "You like this shit?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." Good. And he signed it and passed. Almost the exact same reaction, like, "Oh, no, not that page. Oh my God!" It was an awesome page from the Champions, and it had Ghost Rider, Hawkeye, and Two Gun Kid on it. And a big UFO at the bottom of the page. I'm like, I got to own it. I ended up selling that for a lot of money because of the signatures later on. But if I had to choose between the two, I would have to choose Perez because of the first set of Teen Titans that him and Wolfman did are undeniable. And I never really appreciated Byrne I loved with Austin on X-Men. Byrne had some nice bright points, but he also had some incredibly burned out, burned to cinders points. I never liked what he did with Superman very much. I always thought his Wonder Woman looked like it was inked with a Sharpie. That he did it, and he didn't care. And Next Men I thought was such a wasted opportunity because it was obviously a good idea, and it ran for a long time, but he never put the characters in any kind of superhero outfit. And if he had done that, I think he would have added a 0 to the amount of money he made off of that book. Easy. And it was just, it looked dull. Everybody was dressed in black. It's like, But his Alpha Flight, I also think, was incredibly clever and incredibly well done during his tenure. Then it went right straight to shit.
Oh, yeah.
But Puck, what a crazy character. And that everything that Byrne did on that book, you could tell was Byrne having fun. Just like with the Titan books with Wolfman and Perez. They were just kicking it because they loved it. And the X-Men books were the same way for the longest time, I thought, with Claremont, Byrne, and Austin. Though I understand they never got along with each other. The work is undeniably masterful. There's no way that you can look at, and I think that the X-Men and the Titans especially influenced superheroing for a long time to come. After that, off of that, it was real touchstone works.
Yeah. The entire Image line. That was
and not so much.
Well, maybe not in quality, but just they were trying to do something with that. All right, we'll do a couple more and then we'll wrap it up.
Image was a great idea. And it had there was a lot of problems, I think, with the execution. There still are, I think, with the execution of those characters. I wish they had enough. Let me find the way to properly phrase this here. I wish they had enough humility to hire writers and editors. Because if they had done that, if they had looked at it instead of a bunch of guys just making money doing IPs, if they had looked at it as the point in history that they were, and I mean that intentionally in the past tense, that doing those kind of works, if they were as classic as, say, in quality as the X-Men or the Titans, books that were mentioned before, they could have changed the industry.
Yeah.
And instead, no,
Not so much. Yeah.
not so much.
I lost a lot of respect for Todd McFarlane when he had said, "Oh yeah, I just drew Spawn. I had all the pages. I threw them up in the air, and I randomly picked them out, and that was the order of the book. That was the order of the book." And I was just like, "Okay, you know."
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stories like that.
Yeah, you know, and I was just like, you know, whether I don't know if it's true or not, you know, but that's something he said, you know, but who knows?
He could have said it to look good, or who
Right.
knows for sure. But I can honestly tell you, I've read all of that stuff. Yeah, I've read all of that stuff, and Spawn, writing wise, is not impressive, and in fact, goes nowhere for 50 issues. The Savage Dragon stuff wanders,
Right.
and it still does. I mean, Larson does what Larson wants,
Right.
but holy crap, if they had been coordinated to the point where there were writers and editors that were writing and editing meaningfully,
Right.
it would have been a completely different company,
This is true.
in my opinion. And they needed to get away from the damn circle templates all the time, because they were really proponents for that hardcore misogynistic era of up the butt shots and a lot of circle, incredibly large breasts, even on the guys, and just over exaggerated features that gave comics, I think, a bad name.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, no, yeah.
Now
Like I
I'll be
said-
hated by all the image lovers out there.
Yeah. It's
Anyway.
okay. That's okay.
They
All right,
cost
like
me
I
a
s-
lot of money. I do remember I got a story
No, go ahead.
when they were first out doing a Chicago con, where we intentionally got up at 4 o'clock in the morning because they had an image tent out back and they were still signing books. So I had to take a couple of issues of Youngblood out there to get signed by Mr. Liefeld at 4 in the morning, just to get them done at 4 in the morning. I had this signed by Rob Liefeld at 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Oof.
You know.
Okay.
As they were pulling all nighters, and they were on. Well, they were anyway.
No, I
They
understand.
were probably not sleepy.
No,
put it
no, they had a lot of energy. Those guys.
A lot of energy.
Yes, a lot of energy. Will Eisner or Toth?
Oh wow! You know that. Toth is a big influence to me. I'm very enamored by his. I never got to meet him either, but Eisner to me is just hands down. I am everything that Eisner's done, from his especially his educational work, I think is a big influence on me on some of the stuff that I've literally made a living on. I've got all of the Spirit archives. I've got most of his graphic novels. I've got his signature 3 times over. One on a limited edition hardbound book. One on a copy of Comics and Sequential Art it was literally in shreds when I had him sign it, and he put a nice long forward or signature dedication. That's it to me on it, because I told him it's my book. I'm never gonna sell it. It was first print Eclipse printing of Comics and Sequential Art, and then I've got a program from Motor City Con that he did, that he was at the show. I didn't see him directly. For that, I had a buddy take him up to him and ask him for a signature because I wanted it, and tell him it's from Randy. And he knew who I was again, and knew Arrow Comics, and he wrote on there to Randy, "Best of luck with Arrow Comics," because at the time Arrow 3.0 was out, running full tilt, and I was watching the booth the whole time he was there. To Randy, "Best of luck with Arrow Comics. Love, Will Eisner."
Right.
In big letters, and that's another thing that I cherish,
All right. Cool.
But yeah,
Well,
Alex Toth, on the other hand, master of black and white. Period. Just I have his InDesign book
right.
that I was lucky to catch from Daryl O'Neill, I think it was the one that Hanna-Barbera sent him the cease and desist on. Because he went through his file cabinet and dug up all of his character sheets, because he made mimeographs of all of his character sheets. Said, "You want to print all this shit together into a book? Yeah, go ahead." So they printed 10,000 copies of that book and sold them for $25 a piece.
Wow.
And it's better than the IDW book that they kicked out with his character sheets, because it's got all of his character sheets on it. Every oddball character, right from the guys dressed in black and Johnny Quest, all the way through Super Friends, Josie and the Pussycats in Outer Space, and all of that. And it's all, and I want to say Secret Six, Super Six, whatever that last cartoon was. He did all of the work on. All of those character sheets are in that book, and it's amazing. It's a beautiful piece of work. All right, so I collect any Toth I can get my hands on too.
Gotcha. So we'll end it on this one: Sandman or Swamp Thing?
Swamp Thing.
Okay.
I was never a big fan of Sandman, though I loved Night of a Thousand Cats. That's a favorite, a big favorite of mine. But Swamp Thing, the more Swamp Things, again, masterclass. You can't beat Toddlebin and Bissett and more working together on that property. It's just some of that stuff always needs to be in print. You know, they need to be reprinting all it's constantly, and that's one of the sets of books. The first set of Titans, the Swamp Things, Little Key Batman in different eras, always needs to be in print. People need to be reminded that, you know, people like Dick Sprang existed, Bill Finger, and Jerry Robinson existed and created a lot of this stuff. And Kurt Swan especially existed, though all of these guys were workhorses that nobody pays any attention to anymore. Jim Aparo also is up in that.
Right. So, Randy, we made it to the end.
Are we at the end?
We're at the end. So, do me a favor, Randy. Let everybody know.
It's been 2 hours. Holy crap.
I know. It's been a while.
I'm talking about myself. That's it.
That's fine. That's fine. That's what it's about.
Sorry.
It's all about you. That's fine.
You get me started, you know.
That's fine. But please let everybody know where they can find Randy, they can find your work, where, you know, websites, Facebook, you know, where can they find you?
I'm on Facebook under Randy Zimmerman. I'm on Twitter. I don't twit very often, but I'm on there as Randy Zim. I do the Zim Geek channel on YouTube, though I haven't done a lot of content on it lately. The last thing, in fact, I've got up there is when I inducted Will Eisner into the Alternative Independent Comics Hall of Fame, which I guess I've been given the curatorship of, though I need to talk to the folks about that and get that rolling again. And you can always find me on the Indie Vault podcast that Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. I'm on and with Varian Grant. And then Thursday morning at 9 a.m., and both of those are Eastern Standard Times. We've been doing that for probably a year and a half now, maybe a little bit longer. But we're on Indie Vault Radio, indievault.com, as well as YouTube and Facebook and as many places as we can house the thing at. But Varian's got the internet radio channel out there. We're literally reaching tens of thousands of people every time we start talking. Varian's looking at the numbers, and he's been getting mad lately because we're outrunning his bandwidth. So he's got up to 40,000 now, and he's broken that, I think, once or twice already. And every time he does, that's more money out of his pocket. So now we're talking about ways that we can try to pay for this thing in order to keep going. Once the pandemic hit, his internet numbers just climbed all over the world. We get people all over. We've met a lot of people from all over the world. Some great cartoonists. I've been getting friend requests from all over the place that are doing some phenomenal work. It's been a real joy to do. So plus I'm working on a crowdfunding book. Like I don't know if I said it on the air or not, but I've got a bucket list. I did, didn't I? About Aniverse and that. Yeah. That's going to get done. There'll be an Aniverse omnibus up next, but the project I'm working on now, it takes a little precedence, and I'm having a ball with it and just loving it. And hopefully it's going to come through a lot in the work. And then after that is probably The Unforgiven, and then War of the Worlds, and a few other things that I want to get done. So, yeah.
All right, Randy.
That's what it is.
I mean, it was an honor having you. Seriously. I mean, thank you.
The pleasure was totally mine, JD. And
I mean,
anytime you need me back on again, just ask.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, trust me, I'm not afraid to ask.
Good.
So, anytime you have another thing, we'll bring you back on. But all right, but folks, thank you so much for being here. Please share out the show, hit like, hit subscribe, check out the Tall Tales Kickstarter, and I'll be talking to you all soon. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Take care.
Stay safe. Thank you.